So thank you all for joining us for today's Vaccination 101 webinar. We're super excited to welcome Patrick, who is with the Indiana Immunization Coalition. We know that vaccinations and talking about vaccines is a hot topic right now. We would just want to make sure that we're getting people great information from reliable sources. So thank you so much, Patrick, for being here. My name is Vicki. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist at Child Care Answers. We are the local child care resource and referral agency for Hamilton, Hendricks, and Marion counties. We work with families to help them find childcare, get connected to additional resources and supports. We work with individuals in the community. We advocate for early childhood, childcare, and also work with childcare providers who are wanting to open new childcare businesses. But yeah, we are so excited to have Patrick here with us today. I am really looking forward to hearing this information. I know that it's so important and super valuable. So Patrick, I'm going to hand things over to you.
Very excited to be here. Thanks, guys, for taking the time to listen to me. That's my kids' art stuff in the background. I hope that's not distracting, but as with other presenters during our odd time, unfortunately, that's what we have and that's what you get. I'm going to share my screen, guys. So today, as Vicki was mentioning, we're going to talk about vaccines and more specifically, myths versus reality. My name is Patrick Glew, and I work for the Indiana Immunization Coalition, which I'll tell you more about. So we are a nonprofit based in Indianapolis. We serve the entire state, and this is our mission statement: to reduce the spread of vaccine preventable diseases through immunization, education, advocacy, promotion, and statewide collaborative partnerships. In practice, what that means is multiple things. Pre-COVID, one of the biggest things we did was to create educational resources, some for providers, so nurses, doctors, and other clinical providers, and some for the lay public. Those could vary anywhere from an immunization schedule, which you can put on your refrigerator, it's a magnet, to a diaper bag clip, to information for doctors. Those are all on our website. Those are all free. So I do encourage you to check those out. Our website is vaccinateindiana.org. I'll be sure to share that later. But so again, our resources all free. That was one of the biggest things we do. We also hosted regular meetings, and since COVID has happened, we host a lot of webinars, as many other organizations do. And we also, as of this past fall, host mobile immunization clinics. Those up until about a month ago were not COVID vaccine. They were all other vaccines. So we go anywhere from kindergarten through high school into schools, also serve adults at community clinics. And I'll talk more about that. But again, we're a nonprofit. We work closely with the State Department of Health, with the American Cancer Society, other organizations like that. And we advocate for immunizations or vaccines in Indiana. All right, so getting into the meat here. Why vaccinate? So very quickly, vaccines save lives. According to the World Health Organization, between 2010 and 2015, at least 10 million deaths were prevented globally because of vaccines. On the flip side of that is vaccine preventable diseases can be fatal. The National Foundation for Infectious Diseases estimates that 50,000 adults die in the US every year from vaccine preventable diseases. And finally, vaccines are safe. The National Foundation for Infectious Diseases indicates they're among the safest products in all of medicine. And there are several steps, safety checks along the way during production and of course, post-production. Well, unfortunately, even with all of those benefits of vaccines, the World Health Organization found, this would have been 2 years ago, 10 of the biggest health threats. And number 8, there you go, is vaccine hesitancy. It probably isn't a surprise to folks who are on this, but it's one of those things that's out there. So that's what we want to talk to folks about: vaccine realities and myths. And speaking of which, I'm going to discuss 10 different myths, and I'll show you those really quickly, and we'll go through them one at a time. So here's 1 through 6. Number 1, most vaccine preventable diseases are not serious. Number 2, vaccines will give you the disease that they are made to protect against. So for example, you'll hear people say the flu vaccine will give you the flu. Number 3, vaccines are not safe or they're not adequately safety tested. Number 4, it is safer and or more effective for my child if I delay or space out their vaccines. Number 5, I am breastfeeding my baby. That's adequate protection against infection. Why bother with vaccines? Number 6, this is a doozy and one probably everybody's heard. Vaccines cause autism spectrum disorder. Number 7, vaccines contain toxins or unnatural ingredients. 8, if I don't get my child vaccinated, that's my own decision that has no effect on other people. Number 9, good hygiene and sanitation are adequate to eliminate vaccine preventable diseases. Vaccines offer no extra benefit, they're not necessary. And finally, number 10, vaccine manufacturers make big money off of vaccines. They've invested in them and are covering things up. So those are 10 of the big myths. There certainly are other ones, but didn't want to do more than that. Let's go ahead and get started on these. Number 1, all right, most vaccine preventable diseases are not serious or are not around anymore. Why bother? Here's the reality. So as we all know, the world is globalized. Diseases are only a plane ride away. So even if we think something is not in this country, which may or may not be true, it's not far away. It's very easy to get from any other country in the world to here and vice versa. Reality is most people know how, we all have heard how bad polio is, although frankly at this point it's probably getting forgotten. But other diseases are also really dangerous. So for instance, measles, of those who are unvaccinated and who get measles, 1 in 5 are hospitalized. The flu, it kills up to 60,000 people per year in the United States. And pertussis, or whooping cough, half of infants under 12 months old have to be hospitalized who are infected with pertussis. So a child under a year old gets that. So 1 in 2 chance they're going to end up in the hospital. Vaccination offers protection without the downsides of the disease. So we've probably heard of chickenpox parties before, and the alternative to those is getting vaccinated. Chickenpox is certainly only one example. There's 14 vaccine preventable diseases that children get vaccines for. So it's only one of those 14. And in the majority of cases, even when a child gets chickenpox, it's mild, but oftentimes it's not. And on the flip side of that, the vaccine for it has very minimal side effects. The chance of having even moderate side effects is much lower than the chance of having some moderate problems if you were infected with chickenpox. A lot of times, as we said before, some people think these diseases simply aren't around. They seem like something from past generations. Why bother, rather? The truth is that, here's just one example. Worldwide, in 2019, just 2 years ago, there's over 132,000 pertussis cases. Again, we know we're a globalized world. We can easily get from one place to another in no time at all. That's a whole lot of pertussis cases. And as we mentioned about 4 or 5 bullet points above, there's a 1 in 2 chance that a kid who gets whooping cough, gets pertussis, is going to end up in the hospital. We've also heard of outbreaks in our country. So for instance, measles at Disneyland or just outside of New York City. And herd immunity reduces the outbreaks and how far we can spread. And we'll talk about herd immunity a little bit more. So we really strongly believe, and believe that evidence indicates or supports this, that vaccines are actually a victim of their own success. Enough people get vaccinated, a disease just starts to disappear. And then all of a sudden we think, why bother? Well, what's the point of that vaccine? Well, we have to keep in mind that for polio, for a number of other vaccine preventable diseases, the only reason those things aren't around to nearly the extent that they previously were in generations past is because of vaccines. Vaccine myth number 2. So vaccines will give you the disease that they are made to protect against. And we hear this oftentimes with the flu. No, why? I don't want to get my flu shot. It's just going to give me the flu, so I'd rather take my chances. Reality. So most vaccines do not contain a live virus. There's different ways that vaccines can be made. In some cases, they're inactivated, so a dead virus. There's different technologies for different vaccines. The exceptions to this are MMR, varicella, that's chickenpox, and rotavirus. So those three do contain a live virus. But moving to the next bullet point, those vaccines that do contain a live virus, the virus is attenuated. You'll hear that term. It's weakened. So it's weakened to the point where it's adequate to stimulate an immune response, but it's inadequate to cause the disease. Any side effects you get will be far weaker than you get from the disease. The exception to this is children who are immunocompromised. So they have cancer or other causes. In those cases, there's some MMR, varicella, and rotavirus. In some cases, there could be an alternative that does not contain the live virus. Your doctor would recommend that in that case. But when it isn't the case, those children, and it could be adults too, they have to rely on herd immunity. So we'll talk about that again later, but we're not just serving ourselves, we're serving people at large, many of whom can't be vaccinated. The other aspect of this myth is that side effects from the vaccines can fool you into thinking you have the disease. So if you get a flu shot, sure, we expect a sore arm. Sometimes people have some side effects. We certainly hear about this now with the COVID vaccines. Some people are fortunate and have minimal or no side effects. Some people are knocked out for a day and have a headache, some fever. They don't have the disease. That's our immune system working and ramping up a response. An example of this is with MMR, measles, mumps, rubella. Sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier instead of just using the acronym. 5% of kids who receive the vaccine get an MMR rash. And understandably, a lot of moms and dads would see that and think, oh no, do they now have measles? No, that's sort of a red herring. It's not serious. It's not infectious. It's just one of those side effects that affects some people, but it's minimal. Moving along here, and I hope I'm not moving too fast for folks, but just want to make it clear that I am available for a question and answer afterwards. And if anybody has questions that I can't answer, I'm more than happy to give you my email address, follow up with you afterwards. Myth number 3, vaccines are not safe or they're not adequately safety tested. Reality is that there are several phases of vaccine testing before it is approved. The FDA oversees these. There's standard protocols that have to be met. So typically it's several months to years before a vaccine is approved. The exception, the very timely exception, is the COVID vaccine. And the truth is with those, it was expedited, it wasn't rushed. The way it was expedited, it was done by removing a lot of the red tape, a lot of the steps that normally occur one after the other. They were sort of mashed together, for lack of a better expression. And a number of those companies started production even before the vaccines, all the testing was done. And that was, again, just to reduce some of the time to bring them to market earlier. But that they would not have been approved simply because they were being produced up front. The ACIP, which maybe some folks hear about this when you read vaccine-related articles, that's the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. They're an independent group of incredibly qualified scientists. They review the data on clinical trials. So it's not just the FDA. There's multiple organizations that are serving as checks and balances against one another. But this is this group that, again, they're independent, they're not a governmental organization, and they're reviewing clinical trial data. And then even post-approval, once a vaccine is brought to market, same thing goes for the COVID vaccines, which are currently under EUA, there's continued surveillance. We don't just all of a sudden bring a vaccine to market and say, that's that, to heck with it. We're not going to concern ourselves with anybody who's gotten vaccinated. No, there's multiple different surveillance systems. You may have heard of VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, and the Vaccine Safety Data Link. There are different ways of patients reporting, I've had these side effects, and they're monitored by the CDC and other organizations so that if something is really glaring, that action can be taken. Flipped around, so when people say vaccines aren't safe, well, we want to keep in mind there's a risk-benefit analysis here. So we want to keep in mind the diseases themselves are really unsafe. And that would never be an excuse for inadequate safety testing, which again, we're confident that safety testing is adequate. But it's important to keep in mind that the diseases can be really awful and fatal in some cases. So do bear that in mind. And a final example of surveillance systems in action would be the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine and blood clots. This is horrible. We certainly never want this to happen. If there's any silver lining in this, it shows that their surveillance and response are happening. So if folks think that vaccines are being produced and that's that, well, this is just a recent example that shows, no, we absolutely have to be doing this surveillance, and it is occurring. And ACIP reviewed the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, looked at big picture data, and it was only after doing that that they approved that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine still be administered. All right, vaccine myth number 4, nearly halfway there. It is safer and more effective for my child if I delay or space out their vaccines. So we hear this a lot. I know a lot of parents just don't want to see their child in pain. They think, oh no, this is too much at one time. It's maybe too much for my child's body. That's a lot that's being injected. This scares me. Here's reality. We fight off thousands, if not millions, of germs daily. The antigens, so that's either the bacterium, the virus, the sort of the bad parts, the bad things that our body has to fight against. Vaccine antigens are a tiny fraction of that. There's actually been an estimate that kids could receive up to 10,000 vaccines at a time, and they would be safe. So what we get from vaccines is really just a drop in the bucket compared to what kids actually run into every day. According to the CDC, there's no known benefits of spacing out vaccines. So there's no upside per se. There's nothing gained. The downside, though, if you space out, is that there's windows of time where kids are susceptible. So if you keep spreading them out, now you have a longer period of time where kids can run into somebody who is sick, and some vaccine or some diseases maybe don't manifest symptoms right away. So you have, again, a longer period of time where a kid could get the disease. Also keep in mind, with having to catch up later, that's more doctor's appointments, which can be a real headache for parents, and just more stressful. I think it was the CDC found that it's actually not any more stressful for children to receive multiple vaccines in one appointment than it is for them to receive only one. So also consider that. And then finally, babies and young children, they have the highest risk of serious disease outcomes. So just know that because they have immature immune systems, they can't fight diseases the way adults can. We know in the case of some vaccines, for instance, the HPV vaccine, kids are actually better off getting it younger. So kids can receive it as young as 9 years old now, and they actually mount a more robust immune response when they receive it at age 9 than when they receive it at age 16. So again, the ACIP and other vaccine researchers, they think really hard about what ages are they recommended at. It's not arbitrary. Bears repeating from earlier, vaccines are weakened or dead, so they're not the full form of a bacterium or virus. Some people will say, well, there's more vaccines today. Why does my kid have to get so many shots? Well, yes, your child will receive many more shots, but there's actually fewer viral or bacterial components in them than in previous versions of the vaccines. So we actually know that compared to 50 years ago, even though kids are getting more shots, if you were to sum up the amount of antigen that they're exposed to in those shots, it's actually less than is in the fewer shots that were administered in previous generations. So we keep evolving and keep improving the technology. Then final bullet point here, which is totally understandable. I have a 5-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. We don't want to see our child in pain when they're receiving multiple shots. It's bad enough when they start crying after the first one. We just want it to be totally over. Let's get it done with. There are several techniques to calm your child, and I can provide resources as far as that goes. Again, I totally feel your pain. I've seen my children cry. It's not fun. It's understandable that parents would want to avoid that, but there are ways to reduce that to help your child out, and it's really important to bear in mind the long-term importance of it. All right, halfway, number 5. Moms must say this: I'm breastfeeding my baby. That's good enough. Why bother getting vaccines? Are they adding anything? If not, why put anything in my baby's body? Well, first off, certainly you can concede the importance of breastfeeding. And I think Vicki and Child Care Answers will do a far better job of explaining this than I could. But we know, for reasons even beyond vaccines or prevention of vaccine preventable diseases, that breastfeeding is really useful and beneficial. We also know that it can provide some protection against vaccine preventable diseases. So there's, for all the wonderful reasons to do it, that's just one more. However, there's limits to the benefits of breastfeeding to protect against vaccine preventable diseases. So number 1, mom has to be vaccinated or had the disease herself. Probably goes without saying, but if a mom is inadequately vaccinated or unvaccinated, she's not going to help her child out at all. Number 2, it only confers so much immunity for so long. So kids will get some immunity past, they call it passive transmission. So that's passed from mom to baby. It's not going to last terribly long though. And we actually know there's some immunity from some diseases is not transferred. So pertussis, whooping cough, which we mentioned earlier, polio, hepatitis B, there is zero protection conferred from breastfeeding to the baby. Also with premature babies, the amount of immunity conferred for those vaccines where it's conferred at all is less than full-term babies. So something to really keep in mind for anybody who had a premature baby. Something else to consider: what happens if you stop breastfeeding? What happens if you can't breastfeeding? Those are things to keep in mind. And one note, per the CDC, vaccines, they don't pose a risk to breastfeeding mom or her baby. The 2 exceptions are smallpox and yellow fever. Most people are not receiving those. So those are not standard vaccines that most of us would receive. But just, it's important to emphasize that vaccines, there's no risk to mom, there's no risk to baby by getting vaccinated. All right, number 6, and as I mentioned before, this might be our doozy, maybe the biggest one. Vaccines cause autism, or the current term, autism spectrum disorder. Maybe familiar with this. This was initially posited by Andrew Wakefield in 1998 and some of his fellow authors. And he specifically mentioned it with regard to the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. Well, the study was found to be fraudulent. So it was actually funded by lawyers seeking evidence to use against vaccine manufacturers. There was only 12 children in the study. They were all pre-selected. There's a number of different ways, different rationales for why it was fraudulent, and incredibly so. But what that meant was, in 2010, The Lancet, which was the journal that it was published in, they retracted it. They just said, this is not real evidence, and we just have to retract this and just start over. But since then, there have been more than 25 studies that have showed no link between an MMR vaccine and autism. So the Institute of Medicine and the CDC were some of the organizations that did some of that research. And the other thing to bear in mind is that autism spectrum disorder becomes apparent around the same time as the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine is given. So there's correlation there, but it's not causation. So a lot of parents, altogether understandably, they want to know a reason for a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. It's easy to point the finger at something that was given at the same time, and understandable to do so. But again, it's important to bear in mind it's just because they're given at the same time doesn't mean one causes the other. Continuing with this myth, maybe folks have heard of Thimerosal. Thimerosal is a mercury-based preservative used to prevent contamination of multi-dose vials of vaccine. And so if you've heard about it, maybe you've heard in some veiled or concerned way. Uh-oh, is this a troublesome ingredient in vaccines? So it's, again, mercury-based preservative. It really is important to note, though, the kind of mercury in this is not the kind that causes mercury poisoning. People would hear mercury and understandably can be concerned, but know that this is a different kind of mercury that causes poisoning. Since 2003, there were 9 CDC-funded or conducted studies that found no link between thimerosal and autism spectrum disorder. Between 1999 and 2001, so before those 9 studies, thimerosal was actually removed or reduced to trace amounts in all childhood vaccines except for flu. This was done as a precaution. Again, it preceded the 9 studies that found there was no link. It was meant in a broader effort to reduce childhood mercury exposure. And currently, the only childhood vaccine with thimerosal is flu in multi-dose vials. And there's also thimerosal-free options available for flu. The last point it's worth mentioning, autism spectrum disorder diagnoses have actually increased since thimerosal was removed from childhood vaccines. So just one more piece of evidence to indicate that thimerosal is not troublesome, is not linked with autism spectrum disorder. Vaccine myth number 7. Vaccines contain toxins or unnatural ingredients. So with this one, this is worth keeping in mind. Natural, a lot of times people think natural is good, unnatural is bad. And intuitively, that seems like it makes sense. And it seems like, well, yeah, why would I put something unnatural in my body? I'd much rather keep it natural. It's understandable. We should keep in mind that natural ingredients can be dangerous. So for instance, the germs we're protecting against are found in nature, and we would all agree that they're pretty dangerous. There's a number of poisons from plants and animals. And so we just need to bear in mind that natural is not necessarily good. And the flip side of that, there's some toxic substances that are beneficial in low doses. So Botox, which in large doses would be horribly fatal. And there's some beneficial substances are troublesome at high doses. So get too much sun, drink too much water. And so that's just to sort of think about the logic of natural versus unnatural. Let's try to move away from just the reflexive assumption that natural is good, unnatural is bad. Getting some more into the details with regard to vaccines, all the ingredients in vaccines have a purpose. And importantly, they're all found elsewhere. They're not only found in vaccines. So here's some examples. Preservatives, so we just discussed thimerosal. Those are in there to prevent contamination of vaccines. They're found in certain foods, such as fish. Maybe you've heard of adjuvants, so examples, aluminum salts. They're added to help boost the body's response to a vaccine. They're found in drinking water, in infant formula, antiperspirant. Stabilizers like sugars or gelatin. They keep the vaccine effective after it's manufactured. And guess what? You can find it in Jell-O, or they're even found in the body naturally. And finally, residual inactivating ingredients. So you've heard of formaldehyde. They kill viruses or inactivate toxins during the manufacturing process. And they're found in, the body. In fact, there's a 10 times higher concentration of those in our bloodstream than in any vaccine. So again, let's not consider natural is necessarily good, unnatural is necessarily bad, and realize that the ingredients that are in vaccines are in there for a purpose, and they're not things that are only in vaccines. They're actually much more sort of natural, if you will, than we might realize. All right, 3 more myths. Moving along here. If I don't get my child vaccinated, that has no bearing on other people. So sure, I might respect other people, but I think, that should be my own decision, my body, my decision. Who's to say that I should do this? Who's to tell me that I have to do something for my body or my child's body? Returning to something that we mentioned early on, the world is globalized, so diseases spread easily these days. People leave the US to go on vacation. Folks from outside the US come here on vacation. So these vaccines are around, and sure, it might be your body, but you also have to realize that your body whether you're vaccinated or not, will come into contact with other folks' bodies. And so you may very well be exposed to these diseases. Some diseases are incredibly infectious. So for instance, measles. If somebody sneezes and you're around them and you're not vaccinated, your chance of contracting measles is incredibly high. So do bear in mind that if you think, sure, it's my body, you're really taking a risk. Babies can be the most susceptible and worst affected by vaccine preventable diseases. I think we mentioned this earlier. A good example of that is pertussis or whooping cough. And earlier we said that there's over 130 cases in 2019 of pertussis in the world. The thing about pertussis is that it's actually oftentimes mild in adults, but it can be really severe in babies. We had mentioned that 50% of babies who are diagnosed with pertussis end up being hospitalized. We have a parent advocate group, and one of the members is a mom who lost her first child to pertussis. She was infected with pertussis by a nurse at the hospital who was not vaccinated. So babies really are susceptible to some of these vaccines. Let's keep that in mind. And let's know that if I make the decision to not get vaccinated for myself or my child, that very much is affecting other people, whether we like it or not. You are around other people. Schools, they're easy places for diseases to spread. Thankfully, the COVID-19 is not as easily spread in schools, but many other vaccine preventable diseases are, fortunately. Also, a lot of us don't realize this, but there's some folks who cannot be vaccinated. So cancer patients, those who are immunocompromised, oftentimes with cancer treatment, once you receive chemotherapy, there's this period where essentially all your immune system is wiped out, where you have to start over with getting vaccines. And so folks like that are just, put it in maybe crass terms, they're sitting ducks for vaccine preventable diseases. And so we want to realize that we're protecting not just ourselves, we're protecting those people who don't have any other protection. And herd immunity, we mentioned this earlier. A lot of folks have probably heard this with relation to COVID-19. Herd immunity is meant to protect those who cannot be vaccinated. So again, newborns, cancer patients, what it is an adequate proportion of the population being vaccinated so that if a disease is circulating, there's only so many people who actually could be vaccinated, and there's a shield of sorts around the people who are not vaccinated. They're protected enough by having a large enough percentage of people vaccinated. If we stop getting vaccinated, our shield breaks down. And it's worth noting, beliefs spread like viruses. So if we believe, hey, I don't need this, why bother? This is important. These viruses or diseases aren't around anymore. If we start passing that on, those beliefs can really spread, and little by little, our shield breaks down. Okay, number 9, good hygiene and sanitation are adequate to eliminate vaccine preventable diseases. Vaccines are not necessary. They don't offer any extra protection. So if I clean my house, if we've become a much more clean society, that's got to be the reason all these vaccine preventable diseases are going away. Why even bother with vaccines? Well, there's a grain of truth in this. So sanitation and hygiene are important. For instance, washing hands. We know with the flu, that can definitely reduce flu transmission. Wash hands, clean surfaces. The same goes for a number of other diseases. So we certainly believe that sanitation and hygiene are important. They have played some role in reducing vaccine preventable diseases and will continue to do so, and we're happy about that. But I also am going to show you 3 graphs to show that it's not sanitation and hygiene. They're not the most important reasons for the reduction in rates of vaccine preventable diseases. So here's the first one. This is reported measles cases in the US between 1950 and 2011. On the horizontal axis, that's goes from left to right at the bottom, you have the year. So you have 1950 on the left side and 2010 on the right side. And the vertical axis, which is on the left, that's the total number of cases of measles in a given year. So we're looking at, again, measles cases following that red line left to right from 1950 through 2010. And we'll see there's 4 different arrows and markings on there. The first one is 1963, when the inactivated measles vaccine was first developed. So if we look to the left of that, so from 1950 until about to 1963, you have varying numbers of measles cases each year. You have a peak of approximately 750,000, with as few as approximately 500,000. But then we start moving to the right, then we get to 1968, 5 years later, we get the live measles vaccine. In 1971, you have the measles, mumps, rubella combined vaccine. And in 1989 and 91, double dose of that is recommended. So if we want to think that sanitation and hygiene are the reason that vaccines or that these disease rates have reduced, well, if we think about, say, the 1800s, the early 1900s, when there were really big improvements made in society level hygiene, that probably would have played a part. But this starts with 1963, and you see how rapid a fall is. And I think most people would agree that we didn't all of a sudden have a massive society level improvement in hygiene. That's not the cause. It's these introductions of vaccines. And I have 2 more slides to show you to just reinforce this. This is reported varicella cases in the United States. So varicella is chickenpox. Think of that. This is from 1972 to 2011. So again, on the x-axis, which is the horizontal one, you have 1972 on the far left, 2011 on the far right. And the vertical axis on the far left, you have total cases. So between 1972 on the far left and 1995 in the middle, you're averaging somewhere in the ballpark of 150,000 to 200,000 cases of chickenpox in the US every year. And then in 1995, the varicella vaccine was licensed. And what do you know? By 2002, for instance, we're at about 20,000 cases. So we've reduced massively. So again, as in the last slide, this was a vaccine that came out in 1995. And we could feel confident that our world didn't all of a sudden become a more hygienic place, or our country, starting in 1995. But we all of a sudden saw this massive decrease in chickenpox cases once the chickenpox vaccine was introduced. So finally, not to beat that horse too many times here, this is about Hemophilus influenza type B. That's a bacterium. It can cause meningitis, it can cause pneumonia, and children receive their first dose of vaccine for that at 2 months. This slide is about England instead of about the United States. We had the same setup with years on the bottom and total number of cases running vertically on the left side. So you can see, starting on the left there, in 1990, 91, 92, you have about 850 cases of Hemophilus influenza B, or it's also called Hib, each year in England. And then in 1992, the Hib vaccine comes out, and you find this massive drop in very short order. By 1996, you're looking at, instead of 850 cases a year, it's more like 50 cases a year, just in 4 years. So again, this might even be the best slide. We wouldn't expect hygiene to change that much in the United States between 1992 and 1996. We believe that hygiene is important, or actually this was England, I apologize. But hygiene is not the whole story, and it's really not the most important part of the story. And finally, let's wrap things up. So this is when you hear people will say, when there's smoke, there's fire. Vaccine manufacturers make big money off vaccines. They have a vested interest in them. They're covering things up. They're earning money. There's got to be some kind of scam here. Here's the reality. Vaccines account for only 2 to 3% of profits by worldwide pharmaceutical industry. So they're really kind of a drop in the bucket compared to what all the other earnings by pharma companies. And truly, vaccines are often unprofitable for companies. So in 1967, there were 26 vaccine manufacturers. Only 13 years later, you went from 26 vaccine manufacturers to 17. And a lot of them were dropping out simply because it wasn't profitable. What's the upside here? One piece of their logic is that vaccines they're only given a limited number of times. So especially with the childhood vaccines, by the time a kid gets to kindergarten, they've had just about all of them. They're not going to get many more of those in their life. Whereas other drugs are in some cases given daily. So manufacturers, they're going to make a whole lot more money off of those than a vaccine that's given once to as most maybe 5 times, and that's that. Here's another piece of logic to consider. If we were to get rid of vaccines and all of a sudden the disease or vaccine preventable diseases increased, that would mean big money for hospitals and for pharmaceutical companies from having a lot of sick patients. So if we think, well, there's a conflict of interest, oh no, why should we trust these people who are making so much money off of vaccines? Let's keep in mind that if they stop making vaccines, they may make more money. I've seen one source that said, instead of being big pharma that's making all the money, now it might be big funeral homes or organizations like that. So do keep that in mind. The source for most of my slides was the CDC, organizations like that. I wanted to make sure for this slide that I included the source at the bottom. It's an article from The Atlantic, and the title is "Vaccines Are Profitable, So What?" And that has all its sources in it. So if you want to read more about that, I wanted to be sure I made that available. So wrapping up, we've gone through our 10 myths, take-home messages. What are they? Really simple. Vaccines are safe. Vaccines save you and your baby from getting sick, going to the hospital and dying. Get yourself vaccinated. And this, we didn't really talk about this much, but it's worth really emphasizing. Be sure to choose your sources of vaccine information carefully. I know it's easy to think, well, this person from my social circle, or they told me this, or I saw this on Facebook. Be sure you're vetting those things against good sources of information. And speaking of which, so here are some of those good sources. So the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, they have a vaccine education center, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Immunization Action Coalition, and Vaccinate Your Family. So these would be good, reputable sources of information that wherever you hear, you want to validate against those sources. And these sources are oftentimes addressing some of the myths that are coming up. So they're willing to listen. They want to know what people are saying and respond to that. A little information about our organization, the Indiana Immunization Coalition, or IIC. So our website is vaccinateindiana.org. We host a number of webinars. People are always welcome to join those. We again have our resource catalog on there. So for moms and dads, if you want a diaper clip, for instance, that you can punch out a little basketball, you have to see it, it sort of looks like a little basketball for each time a child gets a vaccine. That's an easy way to just see, here's what my child is due to get, here's what they are getting. Hoosiers Vaccinate is our advocate group. So started out as a parent advocate group, but we want to open that up to anybody who wants to advocate for vaccines. So please do check that out. It's HoosersVaccinate.org. Here's our social media pages, so Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. How we can help. So I'd mentioned earlier that as of this past fall, we, for the first time ever, actually started administering vaccines ourselves. We hadn't done that previous to that. We do this statewide. We go to schools, we do it in community clinics. You can contact us and we will schedule a clinic for you. So please do reach out to us. This is actually all vaccines. So from childhood through adult, and now we administer the COVID vaccines. So we do want to help you in that regard. We have vaccine educational materials. This is our resource catalog I mentioned earlier. We can, if you have requests for new materials, something that would be useful, for all ears. And again, our webinars that we've been hosting, here's just some people we've had on. Dr. John Christensen from Riley Hospital downtown. Gary Nessner is the former head of the FBI's Crisis Negotiation Unit. He gave us a webinar on how to talk to people who have different opinions on things than you might. And finally, Peter Hotez, maybe you guys have seen him on CNN, on different news channels talking about the COVID vaccine and pandemic. So those are just some of the folks who we've been on our webinars. Here's my contact information. Please do, again, email me. Please feel free to call. I'm going to do my best to answer your questions. I'm more than happy to do so. If I can't answer them, then again, email me, or you can even tell me your email address. I'll be sure to contact you. But again, thank you guys for having me today. I hope this was helpful. And please let me answer any questions that you guys have.
Thank you so much, Patrick. That was super informative. And the entire time I was like really listening in, because yes, those are myths that we hear all the time. And so it's really nice, I think, to have the ability to kind of cut through all of it and say, this is the truth. This is where that myth maybe came from. Here is why that's a myth, and here's the true side of things. So this was fantastic, and your graphs and everything really painted a really great picture. So I am so thankful that we were able to partner with you and have you do this for us today. We did have somebody put a question in the chat box, and it was kind of before you talked about herd immunity, but they had asked, what is herd immunity? I know you talked about it. I'm not sure if you want to share any more. And that popped in before you went more in depth on it in one of your later slides, but not sure if you want to talk more or you have other things to say about it. But just wanted to make sure I flagged that just in case.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, more than happy to be here. I'm glad to present to you guys, and I hope it wasn't overly technical at times. But with regards to herd immunity, yeah, there's actually good visuals you could see on the internet, and it will show, for instance, like 100 little dots who represent people, and there'll be one color when they're infected and then a different color when they're vaccinated. And so it would show when 50 versus 70 versus 90% of a population is vaccinated, here's how many people can be infected, and here's how we protect, how we sort of create a cocoon or a shield around the folks who can't be or just simply aren't vaccinated. So in a simple sense, it's creating the shield of sorts, having enough people in a population vaccinated so that they protect naturally the folks who are not vaccinated. And that's the percent of people who need to be vaccinated is dictated by a number of different variables. One is how infectious a disease is. So if a disease is really infectious, if it's super easy to give it to somebody else, we need more people vaccinated. And the opposite would be if it's hard to give a disease to somebody, we need less protection.
That's awesome. Thank you. I also think it was super helpful that you pointed out that because when you started talking about how there are vaccines and that people are saying, well, these diseases aren't even around anymore, it's because of the vaccines. And so I thought that that was a really cool thing to point out.
Feel free to contact me afterwards, whatever it is. We're happy to answer questions. If anything comes up later today, tomorrow, I thought, oh, shoot, I wish I'd asked that. Don't hesitate to reach out.